How do you keep things spicy after 8 years of marriage?
It'll be a sex bar. Of course, it's going to get weird. A lot of studies show that if you do something new as a couple, it strengthens that bond.
What can someone do that has anxiety around sexuality?
So that's why I decided to do the Wim Hof method. No matter where you are in life, everyone does go through very similar things. I started giving sex advice to Cosmopolitan on behalf of a erotic romance author.
I want to congratulate you on being named one of LA's Weekly's top 11 entrepreneurs in 2023.
It's a billionaire romance, but they also have a slight fetish of having sex in public places for that fear of getting caught.
Just to give the listeners a little bit of a taste, I have a little excerpt from Stepping Stone that I pulled from your website. My guest today is joining me all the way from Australia, Liv Arnold. Liv Arnold grew up in Melbourne, Australia, and loves her spoiled dog, Groot, who only eats freshly cooked meals. She's an advocate for mental health and sexual wellness, and she has been on the cover of Harper's BAZAAR, Playboy, InStyle, and FHM to discuss her books. She's a published author, and her writing centers around relatable characters dealing with real-life issues. Welcome, Liv.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessica.
Absolutely. I'm happy to have you here and excited to dive into all of these topics with you.
Me too.
You and your husband, Tim, look so happy. How do you keep things spicy after 8 years of marriage?
Uh, I don't think there's a right answer to that. I think it's important to keep discussing and being open about maybe new things that you want to try, even if it might be something that is completely out of the box, like something you never thought that you would do. So we've been together for about 10, 11 years, and we were friends for a year first. So we've known each other for quite a long time. And it is a very marriage is a very, very long time. So it's for life. It just seems never ending, I guess. So I think it's important just to keep trying new things with each other. So for example, there was one time I was so curious about visiting this sex bar in Melbourne, and it was something I never really thought of before, but I happened to read something online, an article about just bars where people go to have sex, and everyone's having sex. So it's sort of a swingers bar, but you don't really have to try it with other couples. So some people just go there to just hang out or see what it's all about, or a lot of couples, they just stick to their partner. So most of them didn't venture out with other people. And I really wanted to check this out. And at first, when I mentioned it to my husband and showed him the article, he said, "No, no way. We'll be surrounded by weirdos." Um, and then I said, "Oh, well, I'm sort of curious. Like, maybe let's give it a go and just have ground rules." And he said, "Okay, we'll definitely not venture out to anyone else. Like, that's a hard no." And and then I said, "Okay, that's fine. And also, if we go in and if it gets weird, we'll just leave." And then my husband straight away said to me, "It'll be a sex bar. Of course, it's going to get weird." So, but then he ended up being open to it, just as long as this we communicated why I wanted to do it. I was just so curious after reading the article, and I'm such a curious person.
So it sounds like being open-minded and
Mm.
communicating and yeah, being curious, kind
Yeah,
of, yeah.
yeah. So I think that's probably something to keep marriage and relationships alive. And it doesn't even have to be anything to do with sexuality or intimacy. It could be any other thing to keep things alive. Like, I think just trying something new that you do together, that's something that is important for a relationship.
How do you incorporate sexual wellness with mental health and being an author and
Mhm.
writing those romance stories?
Well, with a lot of romance books, so consent has to be an enthusiastic hell yes, otherwise it's a no. And I think, like, as we get more like we learn more about consent and about coercive control in dating. That's something that's really important for romance authors, so that to not leave it any room for doubt. Like so it's a enthusiastic hell yes, whether it's by words or by action. Um and that's something that's relatable to like normal dating life. So often you hear stories about maybe women saying something like, I wasn't too sure about being intimate with this person so soon, but they were very persuasive. But then the more I heard about it or I read about it, that is some form of coercive control. If someone keeps bugging you about the same thing until you eventually just give in, that's not an enthusiastic yes. So it sort of relates to if a shopkeeper keeps following you around the shop, bugging you to buy something until you just say, fine, I'll do it. So that equals to that. And I think being able to freely express that you want to have sex does link up to mental wellness, because a lot of the times if you have been somewhat coerced into going there or being intimate with someone, I think a lot of women or men afterwards, they might have that feeling that something isn't quite right, but since it wasn't forced or anything and they originally and they eventually agreed to it, they don't really quite know what was wrong with it, but they just have that icky feeling inside.
Mm, okay, that makes sense. How does that show up in your writing?
Yeah, so with my writing, so in my latest novel, Stepping Stone, so it's a second chance romance. So the couple gets back together towards the end and they make their way back to each other. So they separate after being married for about 10 years. And so there were these desires that my female character had always thought of, but she was always too embarrassed to express it to anyone, even her husband. And so she was always curious about light BDSM, but she thought maybe people would think that's taboo or she was a bit weird. And when they both go on their own individual growth paths, but also together to make them both independent as people, but then come back together. And what she learns when apart with him is that it is okay to express what you want, especially as a female, because that's often maybe looks down upon, especially compared to a guy. So I think in my book, she communicates what she wanted in a healthy and respectful way. And I think that links up to real life. Like it's okay to express your desires just as long as you do it respectfully and honestly.
This sounds really great. It's a story where you get that relationship and that erotic feel, but you're also learning how to kind of show up in a relationship and communicate what your desires are at the same time.
Yeah, and with my novel, so they've been together for a long time before they separate. I think that would relate to a lot of couples who's been with the same person for a very long time, and it just goes to show that maybe there's always new things that you can learn about that person.
Mhm. Yes, definitely, because we constantly change, right? I mean, I can only speak for myself, obviously, but I'm not the same person I was a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years
Yeah.
ago. So if we're constantly relearning who we are, obviously our partner's going through the same thing, so we can always learn more about the person we're with.
Yeah, and it does keep things fresh doing it that way. And even a lot of studies show that if you do something new as a couple, it strengthens that bond.
Are there any novel ideas that you would have that a couple that's been together for, 5, 10, 20 years that maybe they haven't thought of that could strengthen their bond?
Yeah, so with that novel Stepping Stone, so they think about BDSM, which they had never dabbled with before. But in my other novel, Etched in Stone, so that's a first love type romance, but that could even be equivalent to some people that's been together for a lot longer. So I usually have different themes, like sexual themes, about maybe it's some sort of kink that one of the couple might like. And so in Etched in Stone, that book, it's a billionaire romance, but they also have a slight fetish of having sex in public places for that fear of getting caught. And I think that's something that a lot of people do have that fetish about, and that's something that you can do later on in your relationship as well. And it's something that you can do to start off small, like if you own a house, just start off in your garden, or if you have an apartment and have a balcony, then you can easily just go outside to your balcony. So there's a lot of small steps you can do. But then in my novella Law and Disorder, so that's an enemies to lovers type romance, they actually use household appliances. So I think that's something a lot of people can do. So there's one sex scene where they have sex on top of a washing machine just to feel that vibration. So there's always ways to like get that creativity, like to keep things fresh, even if you don't want to venture too much outside of your house, I guess.
Mm. I love how you can communicate this so matter-of-factly and in a way where people can just, take notes rather than
Mhm.
it being like a, I don't know, messy, like kinky thing
Yeah.
that
Well,
Yeah.
that's yeah, because I do write sex scenes, and when you think about it, it's so weird because everyone does have sex, and it's so weird that people still think of it as a taboo or a dirty subject. But so whenever, and there is, I guess that does link to some form of sexism because I so often get questions like, since I do write the sex scenes, people are like, so is this inspiration from your real life? And they snigger about it. But then when you go to, for example, a thriller author, no one asks them, have you killed someone in real life? So there is that double standard there.
Yes. Wow, that's a great point. I never thought about that. Um, I want to congratulate you on being named one of LA's Weekly's top 11 entrepreneurs in 2023. How has that recognition impacted your career?
Yeah, it's been pretty cool. So I think I was like the only female on that list, but yeah, it's been pretty cool. So a lot of the times, since I do publicity work as well, so I run public status PR, so I help people get their brand and their products out there. I know from working publicity, it often the whatever the media coverage is, it doesn't normally often equal to sales, but it's about having that um, narrative, so that storytelling element of that human interest story of what um, of something others can relate to, and that's how I like to run this PR company. And it was really cool to be recognized by that for that storytelling element because everyone has their own unique story and their own experiences, and so it's not just PR, just putting out corporate puffery type things. It's about finding what might relate to other people as well.
Mm. Just to give the listeners a little bit of a taste, I have a little excerpt from Stepping Stone that I pulled from your website
Oh,
that
okay.
says, every time Jenna Kravitz sees her sex on a stick ex-husband, she still craves him like he's a hot dog with all the fillings. I would love to know what inspires your writing. Where do you pull your inspiration from? Is it from your own marriage?
It's a little bit of everything. So, even with that line, a lot of people think that romance is quite cheesy and um, yeah, and it's for desperate middle-aged housewives, but I actually really love those type of puns, like a hot dog with all the fillings. It makes me laugh. So I just think I'll just embrace that. So people already think it's cheesy anyway. So I'll just embrace it and keep going with the puns because I love that sort of thing. But I
Mhm.
get inspiration from all different things. So with Stepping Stone, I've always had anxiety since I remember. So I use some of the symptoms that I have for anxiety to put into the main male character who has PTSD from being in the war in Afghanistan. And a lot of it, I know PTSD is a lot different from being in the war, but some of the symptoms are quite similar. So that's one of the inspirations I got it from. but also other things. So sometimes I could take a story that maybe a friend has told me, and then I thought that actually sounds stranger than fiction, and I write that in. But then it's weird sometimes because sometimes I get reviewers saying this would never happen in real life, but it actually did. So, for example, with my book Etched in Stone, the main female character, um, she is busy looking at a billboard of a hamburger while she's driving, and then she crashes in the to the front of the car, to the car in front of her, and then since the other driver, they can't start their car, so they she calls the police for traffic control and just to help navigate cars around them, and then when the police come, they give her a ticket for reckless driving, and so she has to pay this fine. So she really called the police on herself. And I remember reading some reviews saying this would never happen in real life, like calling the police on yourself and getting into a car accident because of a billboard of a hamburger. But I did exactly this, and I got in a car accident. I called the cops on myself, and I got handed a $500 fine.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is great. Okay, so I wish that you could reach out and tell everyone who said that that's not realistic, that that was your actual story.
Just send them a photo of the fine I got.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. Okay, yeah, I was going to ask you about more about Stepping Stone because it seems to delve into important social issues. And can you elaborate on the themes and the messages that you aim to convey through the novel?
Yeah, so a few different themes. So one of them is mental wellness. So a lot of people, especially men, they're not that open about speaking out about if they're struggling. So which is part of the reason why I made it the main male character that has depression and anxiety from being in the war. And it was really cool because I got a lot of readers that said that they could really relate to this character, and it made them sort of feel like other people are going through similar issues. So it's not just them going through it. And another thing is sexual wellness. So as I mentioned before, the main female character, she grew up in a very strict religious household. So that was part of the reason why she was always a bit timid or shy to express her desire for BDSM, even to her own husband, because like of her upbringing. And I think a lot of people might have similar upbringings where it might be frowned upon to freely discuss this sort of thing. So these two are some of the themes that I weave throughout the novel.
Okay. And that kind of ties into your own. I know you've mentioned before that you've struggled with anxiety
Mm.
and you used the Wim Hof method for mental
Yes.
wellness. So how has this practice and how has that influenced your writing and your creativity?
Yeah, so I tried a lot of things to help with anxiety. So I was on medication for a long time, maybe about 8 years. I found that never helped. And also I've tried cognitive behavioral therapy, but that didn't really help me as well. And that sort of I tried different therapists for that. So it wasn't like I didn't click with one therapist. But I think for me personally, it didn't work for me because I came to the conclusion that talking is overrated. So continuously talking about what what I'm anxious about and my anxiety, it kept me stuck in that one passage of time. So that's why I decided to do the Wim Hof method. And for those that don't know, he's a man from Iceland, and he does a variety of things, like he does breathing techniques on pressure points, but his main thing is cold therapy, where I did his 10-week program. It starts off pretty light. We're doing 30-second cold shower, but then by the end of it, I'm doing 10 minutes of cold shower. And when I'm in that cold shower, all anxiety goes out the window because all I'm thinking is, I need to get out of this shower. So, and how that impacts my writing is, I think a lot of people do go through some sort form of mental health challenge at some point in their life. And I do when I do a lot of interviews to do with my writing, I'm very open about having anxiety and things that I've tried and has helped me. And I think it's important for people to know that just because something didn't work for you, like for the standard type things like medication or therapy, it doesn't mean that other things won't. So I believe that the body's connected to the mind. So that cold shower is a big shock to me when I'm in that shower. But then I also, about 5 months, 6 months ago, I started doing martial arts, so jujitsu and Muay Thai. And um, throughout doing that, I'm just thinking about not getting struck to the face. So there's there's a lot of things people can do to help improve their mental wellness.
Mhm. Yes, to your point, I've heard the saying before, to get out of your head, get into your body. So
Mm,
doing anything that involves movement or yeah, really like shocking like your body temperature or something.
yeah.
So the talk therapy thing, I agree with you
Mm,
100%. I don't know if it's designed that way on purpose, but you are
yeah.
kind of like digging something up over and over again versus letting it go and moving forward and focusing on, okay, what's next or where do we go from here?
Yeah, and so I think just talking about the same thing every week, that never helped me, but I know maybe it's helped. I know some people where it's helped them. So it's different for different people. Um and yeah, as I mentioned, I think the body's connected to the mind. So if you can push yourself physically, it'll build your mind up emotionally and build that mental resilience, which is what I think I needed the most, mental resilience. So I don't keep my mind doesn't keep spiraling over something very insignificant that I won't even care about in a few months' time.
Hmm. Okay, so I want to ask you a question that's kind of just out of the blue, but it incorporates the anxiety, the mental wellness with the
Yes.
sexuality. So, given your past and your experience with anxiety
Mm.
and how you dealt with it and your experience with sexual wellness, what can someone do that has anxiety around sexuality?
I guess don't be ashamed of what you want. There's a lot of judgment when it comes to sexuality. And surprisingly, when I went to that sex bar, uh, like I wasn't like I was nervous, but I think it did build myself up like mental resilience. So that mental resilience up. And when I was there speaking with so many people that were there for different reasons. So some people were there just to spice things up with their marriage. Others were there with a group of friends or wanting to meet new people. And they came from all walks of life. So some were corporate professionals, some tradies. Um, and speaking with like-minded people that don't doesn't think sexuality should be taboo and to be frowned upon, and to be seen as something that makes you less than a person. So I think it's more society's preconceived notions that if people are uncomfortable with talking about that sort of thing, it's more comes from their own preconceived notions or their own upbringing as well. So I think that's something people should keep in mind. Just don't be ashamed and don't make yourself smaller as well, just so that people will feel better about themselves. And especially on social media. So there's a lot of double standards on social media. So um, people should be able to express themselves without being judged, even though I know people are putting stuff out there, but but there is a lot of judgment still. So if a woman expresses their sexuality, um, in any different way. They might put a sexier photo of themselves up, or they might be very honest and say something like, I haven't had sex for a very long time. People might look down on something like that. So whenever I put maybe a sexier photo up, I find I do get unfollowed by some people when I do that. But um yeah, but when you think about it, it is kind of weird that that happens because there is that double standard there. And then, so some of these people that unfollow me, they're authors or book bloggers. And just out of curiosity, sometimes I go look at their profile and they're following all these half naked male models where their photos are like close up of their crotch, and some of them they're like posting comments like the eggplant emoji and stuff like that. And so so people do have very up and down ideas with sexuality sometimes. And I just
Yeah.
said that in a very long-winded way.
No, that's very interesting. People,
Mm.
maybe, you don't fit the mold sometimes. People,
Yeah.
this picture of you, not you necessarily, but a person in their
Yes.
mind, and they do something that doesn't fit that mold, and that makes them uncomfortable because now they're not sure
Yeah.
who you are or what box to put you in.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really
But then,
interesting.
yeah,
Go.
it's so weird. People don't seem to like blink an eyelid when guys put like naked photos up, but with women, it's a totally different ball game.
Hmm. Yes, and going back to,
Mm.
if you do have anxiety around sexual encounters or just sexuality in general, I like how you said to basically, I mean,
Mm.
and you can correct me if I'm wrong, basically put yourself in an environment or in a room surrounded by
Mm.
people who are comfortable with it, and
Yeah,
that will, kind of rub off on you in a way. It's kind of like you are the five people you spend the most time with.
that's true. Yeah, and just to challenge yourself. So one, I was talking to someone I knew ages ago, and he was talking about maybe he liked to do things to push himself out of his comfort zone. And I think that's something that also can link in with being ashamed of sexuality or having anxiety around it. Maybe try to think of something that's outside of your comfort zone. So something I was thinking about, I haven't done it yet, but that maybe links up to sexuality is those life drawing classes. So be that model in that room, and that would definitely push me out of my comfort zone, being that subject while everyone's drawing me. And I know it's not in a sexual way, but I think it's things like doing things like that to push yourself outside of your comfort zone, where, and I'm guessing all these artists, they just think about the art, so where no one will like think anything of it, but it's just in my own head that I'm thinking, oh wait, being naked, most people might think it's slutty, where all these artists will just more be thinking about just honing their craft.
Mhm. Oh, that's a great idea. And then also, not only would it make you more comfortable probably in your body and in your
Mm.
skin, but it would probably make you see yourself differently once you see
Yeah,
your drawings of you.
yeah, I think so. And when you think about it, a body is just a body. Everyone has the same parts, but still people snigger and stuff like that.
Yes, I think it's definitely
Mm.
society, like you were saying, that sexualizes things, and it presents sex and bodies in a way that I don't think we were meant to look at them.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. So, um, yeah, with sex, I guess in the olden days, people used to have sex to have kids, and so, but now people think about it as very taboo to talk about, I guess.
Hmm. I do want to mention how you give back. Your
Mm.
commitment to donate 10% of profits to the Anxiety and Depression Association of America is commendable. What
Thank you.
drove you to support this cause, and how does it align with the themes of your book?
Yeah, so since I've always had anxiety, I really wanted to give back to something like that. And when I was looking at different not-for-profits, it was pretty cool that ADAA, it allowed people to share their own personal stories with their mental health and how they came to manage it. And it showcased the stories of a lot of their partners, like me. So, a lot of their partners, they're business owners. So, it does show that people can be successful or be achieving things in life, but still be going through their own mental health challenges that other people might be completely oblivious about. And so it just shows that no matter where you are in life, everyone does go through very similar things. So that's why I really wanted to do that. And a lot of my books, it does have some sort of mental wellness in the books, especially Stepping Stone with the main male character, because statistically men are less likely to get help than women because they're maybe more embarrassed to talk about that they're struggling with something. So they would just keep it bottled up, but not even think of ways to help them manage whatever mental health challenge that they're going through. So, yeah, so that's why I wanted to put my own personal experiences into a charity that I have lived experience about, but also I can freely talk about in my books as well through my characters.
That's beautiful. Isn't it so neat to think about too how we do all experience these different emotions? We do all at some point, I believe, experience anxiety, depression, whatever it is that we're going through in life. We all get to experience the feelings, even if we're going through different life events. Like our lives might look different, but our feelings are the same.
Yeah, I think so. So, like, even you hear about really successful, famous people committing suicide, and from the outside, it looks like they have it all, but really they're struggling with something. So there might have been something that happened that people don't know about, or because they've achieved so much, they're a bit of a loss with what comes next. And I think that that's what happens with a lot of successful people, that they don't really know what comes next to give them that fulfillment if they already achieved a lot of things.
Yes, I've heard different billionaires say that I hope that everybody gets to experience the success of having an abundance of money so that people
Yeah.
learn that that's not it. Like that does
Yeah.
not happiness.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but from the outside, if people actually, even I personally think, like, having that much money, it would get rid of a lot of problems, but I guess it opens up other problems as well.
Right, right, exactly. I don't think it solves a lot of external problems, but I think
Yeah,
people maybe don't go inward and figure out the inner problems that would actually solve a lot of the external ones.
yeah, I think so.
You've been featured on the covers of prestigious magazines, like we mentioned, and one of the magazines that you were in, though, you were featured in some articles in Cosmopolitan
Yeah.
where you talked about different sexual positions
Oh,
and
that's so fun.
yes, and in the shower, things like that. Can we kind of dive into that?
Yeah, so I started giving sex advice to Cosmopolitan on behalf of a erotic romance author. So if people want that romance novel type level of sex, and I find those features are probably the most fun that I do for media. So it's really fun to think about that sex position and ways to make it better, and maybe to link it up with a sex position that's in my book. And when sometimes Cosmopolitan does a call out for a particular sex position, it really educates me sometimes, because some of these sex positions I've never even heard of. So, for example, there was one time they said something about, can you give a comment about the pinball wizard position? And I was thinking, I've got no idea what this is. So I Googled it, and Google was a very eye opening experience. And when I saw these diagrams, I was thinking, this just defies all gravity. So it, so yeah, so it's a way for me to educate myself as well.
Okay, you're gonna have to say that name again so that the listeners can Google it.
The pinball wizard. So it's something like being upside down at some stage, and I there's no way I could manage that.
Pinball wizard. Okay, so you
Yeah,
don't need to do the pinball wizard in order to
no,
have sexual wellness.
no. But that defied all gravity. So even in the comments, that for that article that came out, it says only try this if you're fit. So, and I don't think I have that level of fitness.
Okay, I want to talk about your dog. You have a special male in your life named
Yeah.
Groot. and he's made quite the appearance on your website, on your social media. So I thought it was only appropriate to let you
Yeah.
share about him.
Yeah, he's actually going upstairs now. I just saw him walk off. So he was sleeping under the table throughout this interview, but then I just saw him slowly walk up to go to bed. So he's 6 years old. He's a Maltese Shih Tzu. He's very spoiled. So he eats freshly cooked meals. Otherwise, he actually turns his nose up at it. With his steaks, he likes his steaks medium rare. Otherwise, he doesn't eat it. So, um, but he deserves it, I think. Dogs are very therapeutic, and he's a good boy. So he does a lot of things. Like when I'm writing, he just goes to sleep under the table. So you hear about dogs like hassling the owner a lot, but he's just asleep. And he does other good boy things like when we're going for a walk, if there's a puddle, he doesn't like getting his paws dirty, so he goes around the puddle or he jumps over it.
Aw. Now, does he care if the steak is grass-fed or grain-fed?
No, he doesn't care about that. Just medium rare. It needs to have a bit of blood coming out, and he likes the steak juices when I put it in his bowl.
That is so funny. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the listeners today as we start to wrap up together?
Just things that I previously mentioned. So if you're struggling with mental wellness, um, it's not a one size fits all. So I know the mainstream is to take medication and to therapy, but if that doesn't work for you, that doesn't mean that you can't manage it. So I thought that for a long time that I'm doomed with anxiety, like high anxiety for life. But then I did martial arts and I did the physical stuff, and that might not work for you either, but there might be other stuff that do. And with sexuality, regardless of what stage you are in a relationship, whether you just met the person or you're 20 years into a relationship, just be honest about what you want, and be respectful about it so no one gets hurt. So it doesn't even matter if you're on the first date, if you only want maybe just friends with benefits or a certain thing, just be honest about that. And same with marriage, if there's something that you always wanted to try but feel like you can't, then that might put a negative impact on your marriage. So just be open and honest and respectful.
Where can people find more from you, and where can people get your books?
So people can get my books on all major online retailers, so Barnes& Noble, Amazon, Apple, Kobo, or they can. I really love hearing from readers and from followers, so they can find me on my website, so livarnold.com, or they can find me on Facebook, Liv Arnold Author, or on Twitter. No, wait, it's X. It feels really weird saying X instead of Twitter because it still says Twitter on the domain. So they can find me on Twitter or Instagram, liv_au.
Okay, great. And that will all be in the description. And then I have one final question for you. What is your number one health tip, whether it's mindset, diet and nutrition, physical, emotional, just the one piece of advice you would like everyone to know?
Oh, I think the thing breakfast the most important meal of the day, that's a myth. I don't think that's true. So I do a lot of fasting, and I find my mind is a lot clearer when I'm fasting, because if I've had say a big lunch, I have trouble I get very sleepy afterwards. So I reckon fasting, it's good to build that mental resilience. I do 20-hour fast, maybe 4 or 5 times a week. And by the time it gets to that end of the 20 hours, I'm about ready to punch someone because I'm so cranky sometimes. But it does build that mental mindset that you don't need to be full all the time. And yeah, so I guess that's that one tip, that breakfast, I think that's a myth, that you don't need it.
I have to say that is not the answer I would have seen coming. Thank you so much, Liv. This has been a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for being a guest.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessica. It was really fun.
That concludes this episode. If this resonated with you, please give it a rating and review. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out on Instagram. I would love to hear from you. Links are in the show notes. I sincerely thank you for your time and your presence.